Our story continues with more cooks and ski bums. We were all set for the Christmas holidays, or so I thought. Etta got the flu the week before Christmas. I was able to find a girl to help, but found no cook. The biggest snowstorm of the season began. The guests arrived just ahead of the storm. It snowed and snowed and snowed. Each morning I would start out for my office in Breckenridge, leaving Rolf and Sonny with friends in Dillon. Before departing, I'd put the roast for that night's dinner in the oven, turn the flame low, and pray it wouldn't be all burned up before I got home. We had acquired a small gas stove by then, besides the kitchen wood range. Most of the guests had been at Ski Tip earlier and thought it funny that I was the cook. In desperation, I had to put a sign up on the door between the dining room and the kitchen. Nothing clutters up a kitchen like a bunch of guests who pitch in. The sign didn't do any good, as they felt I must have been lonely out there. With a drink in one hand, often a cigarette in the other, while leaning against the refrigerator, especially when I needed something from it, they would regale me with their day's skiing. Somehow dinner got on the table. Afterwards, some of the guests would line up to help dry dishes. I couldn't wash them fast enough to keep up with them. With perspiration pouring down my face, I would hear the last helper in line say, "Isn't it wonderful how fast it goes when everyone pitches in?" I especially remember one guest that holiday. She arrived wearing a mink coat. Her husband and two sons followed with all the luggage. Before I could even greet them, she asked, "Is Jimmy so-and-so here yet?" He was. What complicated matters for her was that he'd arrived 3 days earlier, just long enough to fall in love with a pretty 20-year-old guest who had the most beautiful golden hair I'd ever seen. Each evening after dishes were done, I would sit in the living room, as a hostess should, but longing to be asleep in my bed. Here would come our new mink-coated guest, dressed for the evening in flowing silk and wearing silver slippers. She would plant herself down on the couch next to me and in a hoarse whisper, so as not to be overheard, would say, "Look at them over there, playing records. That little blonde is nothing but a husband hunter. How can he fall for her?" I realized that all the time what she really meant was, here I am, only in my early 40s, sophisticated. ... Dot, dot, dot. I was nodding my head sleepily, she thinking I was agreeing. I was only hanging on with my fingernails to keep from toppling over with sleep and boredom. This was the holiday when I found out the weather decided much of our lives. The day after Christmas came. After breakfast, everyone was saying goodbye. Max, with embarrassment, had collected all their bills, which he had laboriously made out. I know the guests often wondered why, when they paid Max, he'd run right down into the basement. Well, it's because we had a small safe behind the furnace where he would keep all of our cash. That morning looked innocent enough. Everyone took off for skiing until 2, when they would head for Denver to catch the Burlington Zephyr back to Chicago. I took off for the courthouse, which was beginning to look like a sanctuary for me. Upon returning home and driving into the yard, some of the cars looked familiar. There were several new ones parked in the drive as well. Going quietly in the back door, I peeked into the living room to find that everyone to whom I'd said goodbye that morning had returned, and the room was filled with new guests. The long refectory table was loaded with bottles, mixes, ice, and glasses. Someone spotted me peering in the door. "Come on in, Edna. We're all back and we're in a party mood." I could see that easily enough. The Seven Sisters slid at noon, someone informed me. All your new guests got in this morning before the slides closed Loveland Pass. We can't get out. What fun! We're snowbound. Where on earth am I going to put all of you to sleep? I haven't got enough beds for all of you. Oh, don't worry about that, they assured me. We'll sleep on these couches. One added, I don't even mind the dining room table. Luckily, snowplows cleared the Seven Sisters avalanche the next day, and things returned to normal. Sort of. Max and I decided what we really needed was a live-in cook. Etta was still sick with the flu, and she informed me that she and her husband had decided to move south for the winter. New Year's Day dawned that year with my realization that the one ski bum I had to help me had to leave the night before in order to get back to school. After the guests had gone, I started down the hall to do the beds. On each door where the rates had been posted, they had been changed. Opening the doors, I found all the beds made and the used sheets and towels piled in a corner. The guests had raided the linen closet while I was cooking breakfast. They added $2 to our rates. Later in the living room, I found a letter signed by all of them. We want to keep coming back, Edna and Max. You won't be able to stay in business unless you raise your rates. We wanted to make sure, so we raised them for you. About a week later, I returned from work to find a couple sitting in the dining room talking with Max. I want you to meet our new cook. And Max introduced Lena. This is her husband. He works up at the mine at Climax. Since she's a cook and they need a place to live, it should work out. I was elated. The next morning, Lena had a delicious hot breakfast ready for all of us. I was surprised to see her wearing a faded flowered bathroom robe and dirty, floppy bedroom slippers. Well, I thought, we didn't have any guests, and she's just gotten up. Push away that critical feeling, Edna. She'll be all right. I left for work. After picking up Rolf and Sonny at school, I got home at almost 6 o'clock. A car with Wyoming license plates was parked near the front door. Guests, I wondered? We entered the kitchen where the wonderful smells assailed us. But Lena was still in the same bathrobe and was wearing no slippers at all. I looked at her dirty bare feet. Lena smiled happily at me. Got 2 guests, she informed me. 2 fellas, and I put him in the dorm. Supper will be ready at 6, so get a move on. Speechless, I rushed upstairs. How will I tell her? She's so cheerful. Supper, I heard her call. Coming into the dining room to seat the guests, I saw her seated at the head of the tables, still in her bathrobe and bare feet. Well, set up, folks, and set to. Her husband, who was seated next to her on her left, gave her a slap on the arm. Shut up and set to yourself. I looked at Max, as silent and red-faced as I, and at the 2 guests who were just as embarrassed. The next day at the office, I thought of ways I could diplomatically approach our new cook. I could see her as I'd seen her when I left that morning. Her bedroom slippers were sticking out from under the stove, and she was still in the sleazy robe. I've got to find a way to ask her to dress as a cook. but I've got to do it so she won't quit. Somehow I got through the day. I approached home and the kitchen door with butterflies in my stomach. I felt even worse as I viewed several cars in the parking area with Denver rental plates. Opening the kitchen door, I couldn't believe my eyes. Here was Lena in a neat white uniform with clean white shoes on those feet. She didn't smile a greeting, but looked at me and said through tight lips, "Your mother-in-law arrived today. We dress for dinner here," she told me. Little Oma had had no qualms at all about doing what I'd been dreading all day. The rest of the season progressed with a trim, neat Lena cooking excellent meals for all the happy guests. She and her husband resigned themselves to eating in the kitchen, as our new dishwasher also preferred to do. Horatio, a would-be ski instructor, thought he knew the last word on skiing. He had applied for the job as it left him free to ski all day. But by eating in the kitchen, he said, I can keep up with the dishes and get out earlier to sit in the front of the fireplace. I can listen to those darn skiers talk about how good they are. I could tell them a thing or two about how to ski. After watching him on skis, I certainly hoped he never got the chance to tell them on the slopes. Summer and fall went by. Lena then informed me that her husband had gotten another job far away. Wow, back to looking for another cook.